Hello everyone, and welcome back to another True Crime Mysteries video. Thank you all for being here. Today we're discussing 3 more recently solved cold cases. Let's get into it. Number 1. Lena Reyes Geddes. On April 20th, 1998, a couple was hiking in Maiden Water Spring when they came across something on Highway 276 in Garfield County, Utah. They found a body, and both Park Services and the Garfield County Sheriff's Department arrived on the scene. They found a woman wrapped in plastic bags, duct-taped, put in a blue sleeping bag, then rolled in a carpet tied with rope. Authorities believed she had been strategically placed to be found. During the autopsy, she was determined to have been between 32 and 45 years old, with brown hair and brown eyes. She weighed approximately 110 pounds. She had been shot in the back of the head execution style, and the killer had removed the tips of the fingers post-mortem. It was also noted that the body had frozen due to the below-freezing temperatures the day before the body had been found. Authorities had not been able to identify the victim. She would be called Maiden Water victim Jane Doe, and the case would go cold. The case would eventually be handed to the Utah State Bureau of Investigation. Utah Bureau agent Brian Davies did a press conference in 2018 trying to identify the Maiden Water Jane Doe. In October 2018, the Utah Department of Public Safety released a press conference asking for help identifying the victim. This press release also stated that they had considered serial killer Scott Kimball as a suspect and had yet to rule him out. This case had similarities to Kimball's other victims, but he denied involvement. Unknown to the Utah authorities, but around the same time as this press release, Ohio authorities were updating pictures of their missing persons database. A California true crime enthusiast saw the pictures of the missing person database and felt the connection to photos that had been released of the Maiden Water victim. He got in contact with Davies, saying that he should look into this missing person case. They reviewed both cases, and both Davies and the Ohio authorities confirmed that they looked very similar and had a similar mole. They believed they might have found the victim's identity and had 2 family members come up and take DNA tests. In a November 28 press release 20 years after the body was found, the Utah DPS confirmed the victim as missing 37-year-old Lena Reyes Geddes. Lena had gone missing in 1998. When she left for a trip from her home with her husband, Edward Geddes, to visit family in Mexico. She was supposed to travel through a Texas airport, but there was no record of her ever getting on any flights that day. She was reported missing 5 months later by her husband. Lena was a ballerina when she first met her husband in New Mexico, and they got married in '96 and moved to Youngstown, Ohio 6 months later. Now that they had identified Lena, they kept working on who her killer might be. Davis started looking back at the evidence, specifically at the rope she'd been tied in. With advances in DNA, they could use a technology that allowed them to extract DNA from a difficult surface, like a rope. They did find 2 male samples of DNA. One was ruled out as the knot expert they had used previously to see if a special knot had been used. The other sample made them look back at Lena's husband, Edward. In 1998, Lena's husband had been the primary suspect during her disappearance, because it had taken so long for her to be reported missing. He was brought in for questioning with law enforcement in October of '98, where he talked about a blue sleeping bag she was bringing as a gift, the last time he had seen her dropping her off at the airport, saying he didn't go in with her, and that she was planning on paying for the reserved ticket in cash.
Wednesday morning, April 8th.
When she made the reservations from Pittsburgh, she made it from the house, she called?
Yeah.
Do you know what flight company, what plane?
I thought it was a U.S. Air flight that I gave you.
U.S. Air. Now, at that point, she made the reservations. Did she pay for the ticket? How did she pay
She
for
was
the
going to pay
ticket?
cash for the ticket at the airport.
Okay, so you make reservations and then you
Yeah,
pay
I told her to
cash.
take a credit card, and she wouldn't take the credit card.
Unfortunately, Edward took his own life in 2001. Davies could not get a sample as he had been cremated after his death. Authorities then reached out to his living relatives asking for DNA samples. 2 came forward willingly and 1 had to get a search warrant. The DNA came back as a familial match. In June of 2022, law enforcement announced that the case was closed and that they had discovered Lena's killer, her husband, Edward Geddes. After 20 years, she got her name back, and after 24 years, her family got to know what happened and who killed her. In a January 2019 press release, Lena's sister is quoted saying, "I'm very grateful for all your work. I felt like for 20 years no one would listen to me, but now I know what happened. I'm here to bring her home, not like I expected, but I'm bringing her back home with me." Number 2. Benny Scruggs. On July 17, 1985 at 3 a.m., a man called 911 from a trailer home on Travis Drive in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin, saying that his neighbor had been stabbed. He was still alive, but was bleeding heavily. The 911 dispatcher told him that they should put pressure on the wound and help was on the way. During the phone call, the neighbor said that the wife of the man who'd been stabbed had called him and asked for him to come over there quickly. He told the dispatcher that he was holding a knife. The dispatcher said to put it down. This was when the dispatcher could hear a female voice saying, "One of my knives is missing," and the man told the woman, "Hey Yvonne, go back there and apply pressure." When the Wisconsin Rapids police arrived, they found a man identified by the wife as Benny Scruggs on a waterbed of the trailer home covered in blood with a towel over the wound. When the ambulance arrived, the man was pronounced deceased at the scene. Benny Scruggs was 28 years old. He married Yvonne Koshaw on May 15, 1982, and they had one son together named Matthew. He worked as a baker at the Foodland East. An autopsy was performed with the cause of death being a single stab wound to the chest on the upper left-hand side. The wound had gone through his rib, into his lung, and almost out the back. The medical examiner was quoted as saying, "One hell of a big knife, like a butcher knife, and another 3/4 of an inch, and there would have been a hole in the waterbed." Police at the time interviewed surrounding neighbors, Yvonne, and the Scruggs' babysitter. The couple had been out the night before, and the babysitter had reported that they came home in better spirits than average around 1 a.m. On the other hand, during her 3 interviews that evening, Yvonne would give different versions of what had happened. During her first interview with detectives, Yvonne said that the babysitter had left, then she and Benny went to bed, him falling asleep right away, and her lying awake. Then their 2-year-old son was crying. She went to his room for about 10 minutes before feeling something was off. When she went back to bed, she noticed a shovel was up against the fridge and the trailer door was open. That was strange because she always had a habit of locking the door. She then went to look for Benny and found him covered in blood. She then called the neighbor for help. In a second interview, only a few hours after the first, she said that they both fell asleep after the babysitter left and that their 2-year-old came into their bedroom crying. She then took the toddler to his bedroom for about 10 minutes and then noticed the shovel and the open back door on the way back. I checked in on Benny and then called the neighbor for help. During the second interview, Yvonne had stepped away for a moment. A detective overheard her talking to her friend, with her stating, "I was asleep next to him, he got stabbed, I don't know." During her final interview, she had said that they both fell asleep. She woke up to her 2-year-old crying and Benny throwing up. She took her son to his room and then went back to Benny. He was covered in blood and she called the neighbor. Detectives at the time believed that she was being uncooperative with their investigation. Police decided to drain a nearby pond in hopes of finding the missing murder weapon, but they did not find it in the pond. The alleged knife that Yvonne claimed was missing from the home was never found. Over the next few weeks, the authorities would interview neighbors, including Donald Meyer, who lived in a trailer just down the way with a woman and her child. Meyer would tell authorities that he'd previously had a sexual relationship with Yvonne when they worked together 4 or 5 years earlier. He also told police that Yvonne had a temper and that she probably killed her husband. He would continue to tell the police that he had not seen Yvonne again till the February of 1985, and that was about a week before Benny was stabbed. Yvonne had invited him over, Benny was not home, and they had sexual intercourse in the living room. And it was then that Yvonne had told him that if he wanted her, he knew how to get rid of Benny. Yvonne, in an August 1985 police interview, would confirm the sexual relationship with Meyer, saying that she didn't tell the police because she didn't think it was important, and that she was embarrassed to tell anyone. She did, however, deny saying anything about getting rid of Benny. After 1993, the case would go dormant until 2012. At that time, Donald Meyer would stack up a lengthy criminal history, and Yvonne would go on to get remarried. Donald Meyer was on trial for 10 counts of stalking jurors who had convicted him in a 2006 trial for threatening a judge. Knowing this would mean adding time to his sentence, he reached out to the Wisconsin Police Department and asked to speak to someone about Benny Scruggs' murder. In this interview, Meyer would implicate Yvonne, saying that she was trying to set him up for Benny's murder. He would also go on to say that he'd been over multiple times, and that one time she took him into the bedroom so his fingerprints would be there. He also drew an intricate diagram of the trailer and new facts about it, like the bedroom door would open and the trailer's back door was screwed shut. After this interview, detectives would interview other people who were around at the time of the murder. Some will remember talking to Yvonne about the murder in the following weeks or years. One witness said Yvonne had told them that she knew who killed Benny. And another said Yvonne had asked if she thought she had killed him, the witness asking, "Well, did you?" And Yvonne never answered. Another witness came forward after seeing an article in a newspaper in 2013 about Benny Scruggs' murder, saying her son had dated Yvonne between 1989 and 1990 while she was married to her new husband, who is now deceased. The witness said Yvonne said she loved both men, with the witness saying something like, "You can't have it both ways." According to them, Yvonne's answer was, "I killed one husband, I can kill another." The son, who was also in this interview, said that he had asked where the father of her child was, her answer being, "He's not with us anymore." He asked what happened, and she answered, "Well, I killed him." She also said that she was drunk that night and didn't remember much. In 2013, detectives interviewed some of Meyer's fellow inmates. Those inmates said that Meyer liked to talk about how he'd been in an ongoing relationship with Yvonne around the time of the murder, that Yvonne had instructed him to throw the murder weapon in the garbage so it would be picked up in the morning by trash collection. Yvonne died in 2015 of acute alcohol poisoning and was never formally accused or charged with murder. More years would pass before any further progress on Benny Scruggs' murder investigation. In 2017, an inmate would tell detectives that Meyer had told him he had committed the murder, that he had done it because Yvonne had refused to be with him till her husband was dead. The same inmate had overheard him talking to someone on the phone about the murder. Police obtained the recording of the phone call. In 2022, Donald Meyer, now 60 years old, was charged with the murder of Benny Scruggs. In September 2022, he refused to come out of his cell for his preliminary hearing and refused to work with his public defender. In December, Meyer's public defender tried to get him a new preliminary hearing, but the judge said that they would not reward bad behavior. Meyer was present for this hearing and pleaded not guilty. His trial is currently set up for a video conference in April 2023. It is during this trial we will find out what evidence law enforcement has against Meyer. However, regardless of the circumstances, he either perpetrated the murder or helped Yvonne cover up a murder case for 4 decades. Number 3. Jennifer Brinkman. On March 24, 1998, in Marysville, Washington, a father returned home from vacation with his girlfriend to find his 19-year-old daughter deceased in her bedroom. The girl was Jennifer Brinkman, who was supposed to be on this vacation, but last minute had decided to stay home. An autopsy would later show that she'd been hit in the neck by an axe. News reports from 98 would say that they didn't find the murder weapon, but more recent reports say that the axe was found at the crime scene. Authorities at the time also collected other evidence and DNA samples. Jennifer was described as a social person known to walk around Marysville, to strike up conversations with strangers. She often used telephone, dating, and chat lines, which were used frequently in the 90s, to chat and connect with strangers. She was also known to use library computers to access online chat rooms. The Marysville Police Department would send in the evidence to the crime lab, but they were unable to get any matches to anything, and DNA was not as advanced as it is today. Jennifer's case would eventually go cold, and the case would move from detective to detective, but the Marysville police never forgot her. As DNA advanced, they were able to get a DNA sample that didn't belong to Jennifer, individual A, but they didn't have anyone to compare the sample to. The Marysville Police Department eventually partnered with Virginia-based Parabon Nanolabs. They would use genetic genealogy and publicly offered profiles to find a potential list of suspects. One of these suspects had already been on their radar for years. The suspect had been a person of interest Jennifer had talked to on one of the chat lines, and the suspect had sent a letter to Jennifer just prior to her death. But when the suspect had previously interviewed earlier in the investigation, he denied ever knowing or having contact with Jennifer. With this advanced DNA analysis, they could get a search warrant for the suspect's DNA. With the warrant, he volunteered his DNA willingly, and it was an exact match. He was arrested in November 2022 with first-degree murder. In November, the Marysville Police Department held a press conference announcing that they had arrested a suspect, a 52-year-old man. They did not reveal his name at that time. The police said that they are still getting all of the pieces together. In this press conference, they said that the letter had wording that implied that they had met before. The suspect lived only 3 miles from Jennifer's mother's house, but they didn't know if they had met in the past while Jennifer visited her mother. The suspect would have been at 28 years old at the time of Jennifer's murder. They said that the suspect had used his right to remain silent, and that they may never get an answer to the motive. Since the murder, he has worked and lived as a hermit, and he is not suspected in any other murders, nor evidence that he is connected to any other crimes. After 24 years, they could tell Jennifer's mother that they had found who did this. The press conference revealed that Jennifer's mother was extremely emotional. She cried and was very thankful for the work that was put into her case. Jennifer's father passed away in 2013. There may never be answers as to why this happened, but the family can hopefully find some justice for Jennifer. The suspect is currently being held on charges of first-degree murder in Snohomish County Jail. At this time, there are no further announcements on the next court dates or when his identity will be released to the public. Well, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. As always, if you want to support the channel, the easiest way to do that is hit the like button. You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss my next upload. Other ways to support the channel is by joining my Patreon or channel membership. I also have merch, and you will find links to all that in the description box, plus a few extras. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for more. But with that being said, thank you so much for being here and supporting what I do. It is very much appreciated. That's it for me. I will see you on the next one. Bye for now.